Now I'm ready to turn and talk about the debate last night. And I will tell you that I did watch the debate, of course, between President Trump and, well, it was really 2 against 1, but President Trump was on one side. The other was Vice President Biden, who's a Democrat, obviously a candidate for president, as well as the person who was supposed to be the neutral moderator from Fox. It's shocking he still works at Fox, but Chris Wallace. So I want to run down 4 things, and because why I want to get at this in terms of the women's vote and the support of preserving America in light of the Marxist revolution staring us in the face. And that's what I will start with. In this election cycle 2020, we are looking at the leftist attempt, the leftist attempted, ongoing, slow-rolling coup Marxist takeover of America. It's nothing less. We've been talking about this for a while, but again, Antifa, violence in the streets, destroying private property and threatening people and killing people, and Black Lives Matter, a radical leftist movement, a Marxist movement on the streets in America, burning buildings, burning cars, killing people, destroying property, threatening, intimidating, belligerently blocking traffic, surrounding cars, dragging people out of their cars, and absolute silence from the left. Inexcusable, indefensible silence from the left. You have the actual leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party of America, Robert Avakian, saying, this is our chance. This is our time. We're going to have the Marxists takeover of America. You have 2 Marxist organizations wild in the streets, no defense from the left. You have the most radical agenda on the American left ever to have been entertained as a supposed platform in support of an American political party. You have the radical left, you have Democrat socialists filling the ranks on the left, on the American left. You have very little condemnation of anything. You never hear people of any stature on the left saying, well, you know, we're not really socialists. President Trump will say it, and Bernie Sanders will happily say he's a socialist. You hear virtually no voices out of the leadership of the American left, of the Democrat Party, saying, hey, wait. We're not Marxist. We're not socialist. We're not going that way. We are watching, my friends, a slow-rolling coup, ongoing coup in this country. And that is the backdrop against which we're going to talk about this debate. Because what the left hopes is that women, especially, will watch this debate and think, oh, I didn't like the way President Trump acted because, you know, he interrupted too much. He seemed belligerent. That's not polite. I don't like when people interrupt. I don't like when people talk over each other. You know, I think that's impolite. This is what the left hopes, that women especially will be duped into analyzing where we are politically based on the personality and conduct of the debate, the personality of the president, instead of recognizing what time it is in America, what time it is in this country. We are facing a loss of freedom in this country. The left's agenda couldn't be more radical, and yet the left is hoping somehow that especially women, but other Americans too, but especially women, will be put off by what they're characterizing as belligerent, interrupting, too rude, whatever they have to say, and that therefore other people will say, well, I can't vote for President Trump because, you know, he interrupted Joe Biden. Women, we cannot be that stupid. I'm going to come back to women, but I'm going to hit 4 points, 4 really big points related to the debate last night. One was, tying back what we talked to at the start of this show, President Trump comes on stage, and here he is to have a debate against not just some random Democrat, but the Democrat who sat in the White House with President Obama as the entire Trump-Russia collusion hoax got cooked up. A leader, the second in command under Obama, who clearly either was fully aware of the entire collusion hoax orchestrated by the Obama administration, put in place by Hillary Clinton and the left, either fully aware of it and therefore complicit, or else clueless and therefore unfit to be president because he's clueless. But when you're President Trump, he's not coming on stage against some random Democrat. He's coming on stage in the context of having spent his entire presidency so far dealing with a farce, a lie of the collusion hoax, and he's debating against a guy who was in the swamp with the Obama team. I'll give you an analogy. Expecting him to behave like a choir boy, like a person who's just here to follow a debate protocol and prove that he paid attention in debate class in high school and he knows the rules, is like expecting a person who has been falsely accused or who has been the victim of massive lies and attacks and intimidation, or a person who's been the victim of physical abuse, to stand there and act as though everything's normal. Oh, this is great. Like a woman standing there debating her husband who has been beating her and cheating on her. You might expect a little bit of emotion out of the woman. You might expect a little bit of just normal humanity. President Trump is on stage with a guy wrapped up in the leftist coup attempt to take him out, to lie about him, lie about the Russia collusion thing, and the one who really colluded with Ukrainians, and yet his party is trying to set Trump up as the one who should be impeached over that. So he comes to the battle, he comes to the debate, Trump does, with these facts all on his mind. He's aware of this. This is where he's coming from. He knows what's happened in the past. He knows they've been lying about him for years. He knows the news that we just went over in the start of this show. He knows that news. He knows that actually now they have proof in John Brennan's own handwriting that Hillary cooked up the whole Russia collusion thing, and he and the entire left played along with it, never exposing her until this week. So that's how he comes to the debate, number one. Number two, I want to say a few words about Chris Wallace. He gets a pass from a lot of people because he looks like Poindexter. He has kind of a nerdy look and a nerdy appearance and a kind of, who me? I'm just a squirmy little guy. I'm just kind of, I don't really know what I'm talking about. And what Chris Wallace committed in that debate last night was the kind of thing you learn about in law school, and you're trained in law school, where the question, and this is the example everybody knows, if you're in trial and your witness is asked, do you still beat your wife? You're not allowed to ask that kind of question. Do you still beat your wife? And assumes the fact that you did in the past beat your wife. And there is an objection you make in that context, which is objection assumes facts not in evidence. Chris Wallace asked question after question after question, assuming lies into his question. And so it's like asking someone who has never done anything bad to their wife, do you still beat your wife? You're flummoxed. You're like, I've never done that. What are you even talking about? But Chris Wallace did that in at least 3 examples I want to give you. And I'm telling you this to say it's very rattling when someone does this, and Chris Wallace's conduct was despicable. He does not deserve respect. He does not deserve excuses. He does not deserve have someone say, well, he did his best. No. Chris Wallace came in there as an advocate for Biden, an advocate for the Democrats, a flat-out liar in the way he formed questions to the president. Here are the topics. In fact, I think I sent Matt the Wonderful one of them. I'll get to that in a moment. One question was, he talked about the idea of climate science. Now, he said something to the effect of, to President Trump, something about climate science and do you deny climate science? Whatever his stupid question was. There have been story after story. There's this guy, Michael Schellenberger, just came out recently, a former radical leftist climate alarmist guy, just came out recently wrote a book telling about exposing the reality that the climate tactics, the climate change alarmists have been cooking the books, lying and misleading. His entire book was an apology to the world. I'm so sorry about the climate hoax. I'm so sorry we exaggerated the danger. There have been experts, climatologists, doctors, studies, all sorts of people pointing out that the leftist agenda, the radical leftist climate agenda, is nothing other than a leftist agenda to acquire power, to redistribute wealth, to take control of the freedom of the American people. That's what people have learned about climate science. But Chris Wallace's question to Biden, ask him about climate science. And so what is President Trump supposed to do in the context of, I don't know, 2-minute answer? To run through all the evidence that everyone is pointing out that the climate alarmism has been extremely exaggerated, that there isn't nearly the threat to human survival that the leftists try to claim, to run through all the examples of the climate scares that have all proven to be false. He doesn't have time to do that. But the point is, Chris Wallace asked this question because it will get Trump rattled and makes him look bad. I mean, and Trump, he handled all his questions fine, but I'm getting at Chris Wallace as one example of how extreme his bias was. Doesn't even acknowledge that around this world, millions are waking up to the farce that the radical leftist climate agenda represents. That was one example, just assuming facts, not evidence. His question assumes that everyone understands the radical climate alarmists are right, and we're all going to die tomorrow unless we do everything they say. He does not, Chris Wallace does not deserve any credit for trying to ask a good question. His question assumed the radical climate alarmists are right and puts Trump in the position trying to answer in 2 minutes about, well, you know, actually a lot of people question that. So, second example had to do with the white supremacist question. And I want to just say on that one, if you had an honest moderator, if you remember this question last night, Chris Wallace said, well, you know, Vice President Biden, you said you launched your entire campaign because President Trump said there are good people on both sides of the question, and he's referring back to the unfortunate incident surrounding the removal of a Civil War statue, and the big issue which still goes on around the country is some people say that we should remove all statues, any kind of plaques or honors to anyone who served on the southern side during the Civil War. Some people say they should all be torn down. You know, any kind of honoring of anyone who served on the southern side should be torn down. And some people say no, we should leave them up. And we should learn our history and teach our history. Those are the two sides President Trump was talking about. The people who say tear them all down, the people who say we should leave them up and learn. There are two sides of a legitimate question of how we treat statues and other things that honor Civil War people who serve in the South. That's what Trump said. He never said anything about, so that's who he said, good people on both sides of the aisle, good people on both sides of the question. You know, tear them down, leave them up. He never said white supremacists are good people. He never said anything like that. But what Chris Wallace did, but Biden launched his whole campaign on a lie, claiming that Trump said there were good people who are white supremacists, which he never said. And it doesn't matter how often people point out, how often people correct the record, and Trump has corrected the record, and he's made it clear this is something the left does. They just they get a hold of a lie, they repeat it, they glom onto it. And so in the debate last night, when you have Chris Wallace saying to Biden, well, you know, you launched your whole campaign because Trump said there are good people on both sides of the aisle, white supremacists and others, which is not what Trump said. And so this again, assuming facts, not evidence, proof if you ever need it, Chris Wallace should not be trusted in any debate in the rest of American life. He should be fired by Fox. He should be removed from the media because the question was such a lie. The question contained the lie. But this is back to Chris Wallace, why he's so bad. Third one, I sent Matt the one for a short clip by Chris Wallace during the debate last night relating to the question he asked about will you promise no violence coming forward as we sort out what the election results are.
Huge increase in mail-in balloting that we are not going to know on election night who the winner is, that it could be days, it could be weeks,
could be months,
until we find out who the new president is. So first for you, sir, finally for the vice president, I hope neither of you will interrupt the other. Will you urge your supporters to stay calm during this extended period, not to engage in any civil unrest? And will you pledge tonight that you will not declare victory until the election has been independently certified? President Trump, you go first.
I'm urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully, because that's what has to happen. I am urging them to do it. As you know, today there was a big problem. In Philadelphia, they went in to watch. They're called poll watchers, a very safe, very nice thing. They were thrown out. They weren't allowed to watch. You know why? Because bad things happen in Philadelphia, bad things. And I am urging my people. I hope it's going to be a fair election. If it's a fair election, I am 100% on board. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that. And I'll tell you what, from a common sense,
does that mean you're going to tell your people to take to the street?
It means you have a fraudulent election. You're sending out 80 million ballots. They're not equipped to. These people aren't equipped to handle it, number one. Number two, they cheat. They cheat. Hey, they found ballots in a waste paper basket 3 days ago, and they all had the name military ballots. They were military. They all had the name Trump on them.
Vice President
you think
Biden,
that's good?
Vice President Biden, final question.
Okay, people, I can hardly stand, but the reason I wanted to play that is this. When Chris Wallace is asking President Trump that question, I know that people say, well, you know, he could have just said, sure, ultimately, I'll go along the election results. But again, assuming facts, not an evidence, a biased question, Chris Wallace tried and several times said, everyone knows there's no problem with mail-in ballots. There's no problem with fraud. I don't know why, you know, people do it all the time, blah, 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 blah. What Biden is, what Trump is hearing is, and everyone can see, is the left is working to steal this election. Everyone can see this. The massive mail-in ballots being sent out, obviously an attempt, and everyone can see it who pays any attention, understands that mail-in ballots are the primary source of potential mail-in fraud. And so when Trump hears that question, what he's hearing is, if the Democrats manage to steal this election, if they manage to somehow claim they won it, but everyone can see it's fraudulent, will you just surrender? That's what he's really being asked. He's saying, no, actually, I will not surrender. I will not surrender. If what I know is the mail-in ballots were fraudulently used and the supposed outcome of the election was driven by fraud, I, Trump, am not just going to throw my hands up and say, oh, okay, I give in, let the cheaters have it. That is what Trump is hearing. And he's right to hear it that way. He's right. When Chris Wallace cannot acknowledge that mail-in ballots, as quoted, again, we talked about this a couple of days ago on the show, back in 2015 or 2005, there was a massive commission, federal level, chaired by former President Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State James Baker, who concluded that absentee ballots remain the largest source of potential voter fraud. Everyone who looks into this issue understands. All the experts understand. You look into these things, you understand that's how the left cheats. Maybe Republicans do too, but it's a problem of the left. It's the left pushing this. But President Trump, on the debate stage, 2 minutes to answer, he's basically being asked to say, will you concede, even if the Democrats cheat, and they win by cheating, and everyone can see it's cheating, once we have somebody certified Biden won, will you just give up? And you know what, folks? Everyone who loves Trump, everyone who supports him, agrees with him. No, we're not going to let the left steal this election, and everyone can see that's what they're trying to do. Now, it would have been great if Trump had been able to, conjure up in that very short 2-minute answer something along the lines of acknowledging Jimmy Carter has said and James Baker has said absentee ballots are the largest source of potential voter fraud. It'd be great if he could have quoted Attorney General William Barr, who has repeatedly said, mail-in voting absolutely opens the floodgates to fraud. This is what the facts are. And again, this little segment, I told you I have 4 things about the debate last night. One was where Trump walks into the debate recognizing he's debating Biden, who was all involved with the coup attempt against him on the Obama-Hillary mess they created with the Russia collusion hoax. Number 2, you had Chris Wallace asking questions, assuming facts, not in evidence, essentially baking lies into his questions. When he says, everyone knows there's nothing wrong with mail-in ballots, and there's perfectly nothing wrong with them. So, President Trump, will you go ahead and agree that if the Democrats win this election through mail-in fraud, you'll just capitulate? Thank goodness Trump said, no, I won't capitulate. He had a great line there, too, Trump did, by the way, where he said something about when Biden was saying, well, won't you accept the results of the elections? And Trump said something like, the Democrats haven't accepted the results of the 2016 elections. They're still fussing over those. It was a great line. But I want to hit 2 other points about the debates last night, and ending with the impact on women. One was how well Biden did. And I mean that in the sense of he strung together numerous coherent sentences without stumbling for an hour and a half, which was honestly something I have said on the show I didn't think he could do. I didn't think he could handle it. I will say, and many of you, if you pay close attention, have noticed there are pictures out now on Twitter, other places, where at one point in the evening, when Biden had his arm up like this, so he's got his cuff of his shirt, you can see an object protruding out of the end of his sleeve, it looks like a medical, like an IV type thing, sticking out of his, so something was in his sleeve, looking like a medical device of some kind. A lot of people curious about whether or not he had to be medicated in some way to be able to function in that debate. Because he has, and people, this is the same Biden. I know everyone, I think people saw Biden last night and said, wow, I guess we were all wrong. Guess he's really just doing great. Guess he's totally, you know, he's just fine. He's mentally together and we were all wrong all this time. This is the same Biden who over the past 6 months has been hiding in the basement of his home, who often cannot string together 2 sentences, who loses track when he's beginning to recite the very beginning of the Declaration of Independence, when he's trying to remember which race he's running in, can't keep track of when he was in the White House. He hasn't had like one little mental stumble where he forgot someone's name, or he said something was last Tuesday, but it was really Thursday. We're talking dozens and dozens of instances throughout this campaign cycle of 2020 when he had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. Lost in the middle of a sentence, stuttering, mumbling, looking off, his wife finally having to jump in, rescue him, saying, that's all for now, thanks, Joe, and drag him away. It's the same person. He did not suddenly overcome dementia. He did not. I will grant the left, they propped him up and he got through an hour and a half. He's still the same Biden. It's still the same guy who could not put 3 sentences together. Now, a lot of speculation has been around the idea that they have, if you've noticed the cycle, the news cycle reports frequently how Vice President Biden will come out in some morning statement or some morning short interview, and he's done for the day. His campaign schedule's done for the day. There have been headlines, done for the day, 9:20 a.m., finished for the day, 8:30 a.m. There's been speculation that they were trying to have him change his sleep cycle. He could be up in the morning talking, but get him into sleeping all day. It's called changing your circadian rhythm. So you're sleeping all day. And so when you, at the end of the day, when you would normally be waking up after a long sleep, for him it's like morning. They were trying to get him into a rhythm where because he has been unavailable during the heart of the day for weeks now, and done at 9 in the morning with his press whatever he does, press conferences. So the idea was maybe he's being urged to get into that rhythm, sleep all day, so he could be propped up and be as alert as possible, because in his sleep cycle he's in the morning. He's in morning cycle. Now that is speculation. It sounds very plausible to me because there is no other explanation, or I don't know of the explanation for how he could put together an hour and a half of sort of coherence when he couldn't do it for 5 minutes in the last months and months of the election cycle. Something weird was going on with Joe Biden last night. I think he probably is getting some medications, and I know from watching senior members of my family go through dementia, most of them are far more alert in the morning. They're best in the morning, and as the day goes down, they get tired, they get worse. I don't know if that's what happened, but just because Vice President Biden managed to show up for an hour and a half and engage in a debate does not mean his new mental status of performing for an hour and a half is sustainable. It doesn't mean he can handle that. It does not. It just means they got him through an hour and a half, probably with some drugs into his system, keeping him alert, keeping him active. Who knows? But it's not because he's actually back to being mentally fit. The same Biden we've been watching for months did not go away. He was there. That's the same Biden that we were watching last night. The other great thing about Biden, or good thing for Trump about Biden last night, he did get Biden to distance himself from a lot of the radical left agenda. He got Biden to say, oh, no, I'm not doing the Green New Deal. No, not me. I'm not the Green New Deal. I mean, probably a lot of leftists not too happy about that. They got Biden to denounce the Green New Deal. They got him to say he does not support single-payer socialized medicine. He's got something similar, but not exactly that, but he did. So he did kind of backpedal from that. So Trump did, through needling him, get him to back off from some of the left-wing agenda that really has brought many of the young people, the leftists, out in this country, because they thought he was going to bring them the Green New Deal and socialized medicine. So Trump accomplished that. But now I want to get back to the final and closing today and talking about women and voting for Trump. Obviously, in the debate last night, President Trump was trying the tactic of needling Biden and to see if you could get him rattled, because Biden, not on drugs, is easily rattled, easily thrown off his argument, thrown off the discussion, and can't remember what the topic was. And that, I mean, I don't have any inside scoop to the Trump campaign, but I'm going to guess that was a decision. Try to get Biden rattled and see if you can knock him off his game. So President Trump interrupted him a lot. He talked over him. He corrected him. He defended himself. And so there are people watching it saying, you know, why can't Trump be quiet? Even I was thinking, I'd kind of rather let Biden talk more, because I think the more he talks, the more foolish he'll sound. But, you know, there was the debate last night left a lot of people rattled, especially women. Left people feeling rattled, like, I don't really want to see the president badgering Biden. I don't want to see him like the president acting that way, and you shouldn't interrupt, and you shouldn't do that. And, you know, they follow the rules. There's 2 minutes for every answer, and let the other guy have his 2. All of that. People had that reaction to the debate. And last night, I just had that reaction a little bit. But I have to tell you where I've come around to. We are in a fight for the very existence of America the free. That is where we are. We're in a fight over whether or not we're going to go down the socialist, leftist hole that the left, the Marxist left in this country is coming at America like a freight train headed our way. We have that coming at us, and we have Trump standing up against it. That's where we are. It doesn't matter what Joe Biden thinks about anything. If he were to possibly win, which God help us if he does, if he were to possibly win, he's not going to be in charge. He's not going to be Mr. Moderate Senator with a smiley face. It's going to be the beginning of the leftist takeover of America. It's going to be like the election of Chavez in Venezuela or the election of Castro in Cuba. That is where we are headed. Biden doesn't know what day it is. He did well last night. I'll give him credit. Maybe they can drug him up and get him through another one. But what we are fighting against in this country is a radical left taking over this country. And what we have, the boulder we have standing in the road, stopping that freight train, is President Donald Trump. So women, if you were bothered by interruption, talking over, belligerence, okay, fine. Teach your kids to be more polite. Teach them to follow Emily Post's rules of etiquette. I agree. We taught our children to be polite and not interrupt. But this is not an etiquette competition. This is not a competition to see who can perform better under the debate rules. This is not about who honored the 2 minutes precisely and who talked over the end of 2 minutes. This is about whether or not we hold on to America the free or we lose America the free. That's what the election is. It doesn't matter what you think or what anyone thinks about whether or not President Trump interrupted Joe Biden too often or talked over him or sounded belligerent. None of that matters. It does not matter. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have the radical left take over America, or you're going to have President Trump and the preservation of America. And women especially, the left tries to play to your heartstrings, try to say, well, women, ladies, weren't you kind of offended? I mean, that's just terrible. President Trump interrupted, and he was belligerent, he was rude, and he talked over. Do not get duped into thinking that that's what matters in 2020, whether or not someone followed debate rules precisely or interrupted somebody or talked over them. It does not matter. What matters is if you figure out, and if enough Americans figure out, that we either have America the free and Donald Trump, or we have the tumbling over the socialist cliff that is coming without question if you have the radical left win this election in 2020.